Hello and welcome along to another episode of our Stadium Review series, Review the 92. We're on to episode 6 now, and we are moving into the C's for the first time. And unfortunately, I've got a sneaky suspicion on my part this might be the most negative episode so far. So I'll do my usual apology for the fact that we'll probably offend fans of the club, and this week's the first time I think we'll possibly need that apology. But it's only my opinion. We'll live with it, and I'm not going to throw Tom under the bus, who is joining me as he always does. So thank you for coming along again.
Pleasure.
As always, we will talk about a ground, we will rank them on certain areas, and we encourage you to get involved as well. Let us know what you think. But let's talk about Cambridge United today, and I will take you through some of the stats before we get going. If you are looking forward to this one, put a thumbs up on it and subscribe for regular content every week. But I'll get that in before we do all the negatives today. So Cambridge United, the Abbey Stadium, which has had various sponsorship names across the years, but at the moment is just the Abbey Stadium, is a football stadium in Cambridge, which hosts Cambridge United. It has a capacity of 8,127. And for the first time, we need to say how many of those are seated. Seated is 4,376.
First time?
I know Accrington as well. I was thinking that halfway through the sentence. So there you go. Mistake already. But the first time that I've mentioned it, because I didn't do so for Accrington. The ground was built in 1923 and opened in 1932. And weirdly, its record attendance was for a friendly in 1970, which was against Chelsea, and marked them opening the ground's new floodlights. It was 14,000 before it got changed to seats in areas. And it's the first time ever that an English League's grounds record was a friendly. So one interesting stat about it.
Trivia?
Not often I get trivia into these. So we think a few times. There are some memories that are a bit sketchier than others. I've only really got a good memory of one game, so I'll talk a bit more about that as we go along. But I guess we're mainly here to focus on the ground and the experience of going itself. So I'll start with you, Tom. Give me an overview of your thoughts on Cambridge United and the Abbey Stadium.
Yeah, well, as you established there, it's less than 9,000. It's a relatively small ground.
Mm-hmm.
And we always talk about this. I'm sure listeners are bored of hearing it now about the walk. But let's cut to the chase. It is a bit of a trek from the train station to the ground.
And you're a man who doesn't normally complain about the walk. It's normally only me. And I think it's fair to say even you would complain about that walk.
Yeah, you don't.
You basically walk to the edge of Cambridge, don't you?
Yeah, so you walk through the entire city centre, down the high street, and then out again, and then through like an industrial estate kind of thing, then a park. I mean, park's all right. It's a nice walk through a park, but just
the last 15 minutes is down an A road, isn't it? Which is lovely as well. So.
The walk just goes on. It just seems like forever. You just think it's it's not well connected on public transport. Well, maybe a Cambridge fan will say, actually, you can get a bus direct from the train station to the ground. We never looked into that.
But I guess in terms of making it clear and obvious for away fans, there are some grounds where it's very clear what the transport is when you get there. I use an example of Stoke that I went to earlier this season, and there's brilliant transport links in the centre and at the stadium to make it very clear for anyone who's never visited, which we definitely can't say about Cambridge.
No, I didn't have my eyes peeled, but I didn't see anything like, away day fans just jump on the 101 and you'll be taken straight from the train station to the stadium. Exactly. I didn't see anything like that, no.
In terms of the ground itself, give me your initial overview on the thoughts, because there's a couple of observations I would like to make later
on. So I think I've been twice to the Abbey Stadium. I'd say it's relatively nondescript. It's a small 4 stands. Nothing. Is there, like we said, it's in a park. Is there a river that runs alongside it or something? Or am I getting confused? Maybe I'm thinking of Fulham.
I'm not quite sure, because the Cambridge one, I guess that's the first thing I was going to mention, is to get to the away end, you have to walk through a park.
Yeah.
And it leads to some problems after the game, particularly because it's a big open space and policing to keep the two fans separate. Cambridge and Luton, for some reason, seems to be a rivalry that I don't quite work out. But that caused a few problems. I remember a couple of times we got penned in to the edge of the park for about half an hour after a game, which wasn't ideal.
Yeah, I think because Watford and Luton haven't been in the same league, have they, for a long time now? And Luton have been down in the Conference and League Two and playing the likes of Cambridge and Stevenage. I think fans who have never had the glory days playing Watford have been on the lookout to form a bit of a rivalry for the sake of one. So any club that's relatively local, even though there's no history of bad blood, I think they've kind of gone looking for a bit of a rivalry, haven't they? So yeah, Stevenage and Cambridge.
I guess moving on a little bit further, the other thing I wanted to mention about the ground is your description makes it sound like it's going to be one of the ones we like. 4 little stands, old school stadium, no corners, no problems like that. But I have one big problem with that away end, which 2 of the 3 times I've sat in, and once we were in the side terrace. But in the big away end, it is so far back from the pitch, and it's so high up. You don't feel like you're even there.
And that's exacerbated by the fact that the goalpost kind of stops, and then there's that bit behind the goal where the players can warm up, and there's just this patch, quite a wide bit of grass.
Yeah, so they warm up behind the goal, don't they? Yeah.
So you feel even further away from the action, which you don't expect actually at small grounds in the lower leagues. Like in the Premier League, it's kind of part and parcel. I mean, for God's sake, West Ham had a racetrack that they had to cover up, didn't they? So you expect to be quite far in these modern big grounds from the action, but in the part of the attraction of lower league grounds is the intimacy. Like you're on top of the pitch, you're in with the action. The action almost can hear the players shouting sometimes, and that's almost, you're right. That's kind of lost, even though it's a small ground. You don't get that.
It's probably the biggest thing that puts me off with that. I've got to say, in fairness, the other time I went, which was for the best game, ironically, and the only one I remember, I was in the side terrace that had been half and half for the home and away fans. And there, you're very close to the pitch. It's very enclosed. It's a proper lower league football ground. It's what you would expect, but that's not the usual away stand.
I've never sat in that part. I think I've been twice, and both times in the bit behind the goal, the proper away stand.
So I guess for me, it's got mixed memories. I've watched a couple of awful Luton games there from a Luton fan point of view, and I've watched one absolutely brilliant one. And apparently I've been to a game where I saw a brilliant goal and I don't even remember it, but you'll remember that one. But we better start ranking this on the 4 areas, and I'll apologise to Cambridge fans in advance. You can have the same opinion about Kenilworth Road. It really doesn't bother me, but I try my best to be fair as I have with the rest. So let's start with atmosphere. There's one thing we haven't mentioned yet, which is going to come up now. So go ahead.
I know where this is going. I think you hate them more than I do, so I'll let you have a little rant if you want.
Okay.
They're your thing.
So I don't mind them generally. So we're talking about drums here in the stands. So like I'll give an example. When I've gone to a couple of away games to watch Tranmere, there's a drum, but you can hear people singing over it. When the drum is there to replace the atmosphere, when there is a drum instead of singing and it's just a drum beat and you can't actually hear voices, it becomes a bit pointless. And I mean, there's about 10 people that sing their little song, which is just the same line over and over again. It's not actually a song. There you go. So it's one of my least favourite things, and it's the fact that no one actually sings with it. There's not a hardcore fan base. The stadium, even for a rivalry for Luton, hasn't been hugely packed for any of the games, really. It's something that I can't really give it a great rating for. And I'm not just pulling Cambridge out here, because pretty much anywhere a drum appears over singing fans, I'm going to be ranking it down. But I'll let you go first on the number, because you'll probably seem more lenient then.
Yeah, I'm not going to be so scathing, so critical of them. I think, as I said, it did develop into almost a derby. Cambridge and Luton isn't that far apart. What's about maybe 40 miles off the top of my head? Yeah, it's there's not that many clubs around that area, so it's relatively close. And I do think a bit of a rivalry developed, and Luton travelled in good numbers, I imagine. So there was an effort. Admittedly, the drum was compensating maybe for a lack of originality and enchant, but there was something there. You could feel that they were trying to give Luton some stick, and Luton were in town, and they were making an effort. I thought they did put on a bit of a performance. So I'm going to give it a 7, actually. I'm going to be generous.
Wow. I mean, you've really surprised me there. I mean, I thought I was going to be generous, because I was going to give it a 5. And that was because, as you say, and I sort of ummed and ahed about this, it's a 5 because, yes, the atmosphere was okay for the games we went to. But I'm thinking if that's developed into some sort of derby and was one of their most vociferous supports, I would worry for some of the other games, would be my other side of that.
I take your point, but we're only able to base our experience of the matches we've been to, and we've both only been to Cambridge Luton away fans.
Yeah.
So that's what we can judge it on. So for that game that I've been to, the 2 games I've been to, I did get the feeling that the home fans wanted to give the players and the Luton fans a bit of stick, and they felt a bit pumped up for it. So yeah. And the other thing I'm bearing in mind is it seems like the most passionate Cambridge fans sit behind the other goal, which I think is the terrace.
And normally at other ground it's close to the away fans, isn't it?
So yeah, maybe you'd have a bit more back and forth if they were in the corner, like right next to the away fans. So fair. I'm taking that into consideration as well. They're further away. So 7. I'll give it 7.
I guess the other thing I would say is one of the games I went to that you didn't before was an FA Trophy tie where there was pretty much no one in the ground. So I've tried to erase that one and not base it on that. But I think...
How many times have you been? Are you including that game as well?
I think I've been either 3 or 4. Because I've definitely been to 2 that you haven't, an FA Trophy game and the 4-3 one where I was in the side stand. But I don't remember that I've been to with me. Plus the 2, did I go to both with you? That's the thing.
Yeah, I didn't go without you. Yeah.
There you go. So then 4 times I've been. 4 times. It's a stadium I know.
You know, like the back of your hand.
I've had more time to get used to hating it, which is probably the problem. But I'm trying my hardest to be fair. But I know that this is going to be the hardest one for me to do. So let's move on to the second area, which is of course location. And this one, based on your first 2 minutes, isn't going to be generous. I don't think there's a way to.
No. So again, repeating ourselves, we do public transport every time, and it's not easy. Well, particularly from Luton, you have to get a bus and then a train and then a huge walk. I mean, don't get me wrong, Cambridge is a very picturesque city.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to walk along. It's not an awful place. It's really touristy, and obviously the history and everything. I like Cambridge as a place, but it's a long walk. It's longer than you expect to do. So if I was going to give a number for that, I'd have to give it 4.
I think that's fair. And I think the thing we have to take into account is we're not just judging the location. We are judging the location of the stadium, but we've got to talk about the day experience, the way of getting there. So a couple of times we found nice places to go for lunch. There's plenty of options. There's decent pubs and things to watch football in. And actually the walk from the train station to the city centre itself and the city centre and the park surrounding are quite nice. So we do have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, I would say I'm giving a 4 because Cambridge itself is nice and there's things to do and nice places to eat, as you said. If they didn't have that going for it, then
I mean, if it was solely the
you'd be looking at a 1 or 2 there, I think.
I mean, if I was looking at this earlier actually, because I was actually rehearsing for the first time to make sure that I wasn't going to be too harsh. So
I can tell you're more professional today.
Thanks, appreciate it. I mean, going based on the stadium, if it was just the walk to the stadium and nothing else, I would give it a 2. But because of Cambridge being right, I had tipped myself up to a 4, the same as you. So
there you go, any Cambridge United fans. We may be critical of your support and your ground, but we like your city.
There you go. So you've got a crap ground, but you've got a nice place to live. So
yeah, that's it.
There you go.
The opposite of Luton.
Probably the opposite for Luton. Right, moving on to the third one, which is, of course, value. Now, I think we need to probably do a bit of research on this because we were always going back in the conference days. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do to go and be fair, because I'd looked at the ticket prices for those and they weren't great, to be honest.
I believe the Luke Gutfridge wonder goal that you don't remember was actually the first year in League 2.
League 2, yeah. All of those were between sort of 15 odd pounds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Cambridge. I'm going to click on home tickets and I'm going to see how much they're charging now for home tickets because I think that's fair.
What league are they in now? League 2?
They're in League 2 still. They've sort of been floating around in the bottom half most of the time, had one good season. So home tickets at the moment, according to their website, they have been charging, depending on the game, between £16 and £20, which pretty much middle of the road for the southern teams, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to bear that in mind, haven't you? Like Cambridge is going to be quite an affluent city, so they know that their support can probably afford it. You have to bear that in mind, even though whether that's right or wrong. And yeah, southern team.
Still not more than St Albans.
No. Yeah, we discussed that, didn't we, in the last episode? So averaging £18 for League 2. Yeah, kind of what you expect. 6 standard.
Yeah, I think it's solid enough. I mean, to be honest, it's probably the one I'd be more generous on. I obviously haven't been horrified by the prices because, as Tom mentions, I've been back 4 times. So I was actually going to give this one a 7 purely because I wanted to look like I was finding something positive in Cambridge. And I've been to other surrounding areas. So I guess Stevenage is one that will come up later on where we've paid more for arguably less or the same. And in fairness to Cambridge, behind the goal, as much as I've complained about that stand, you do get a seat for that price as well. So I have to bear that in mind too. So I think for the price, for getting a seat, I'm going to give it a 7. And hopefully that will allow me to be harsh on the next one.
Question: have you still got the information up on the Cambridge website there?
I haven't, no, but go on, ask me a question.
I was going to say, did you see by any chance if you stand in the terrace stand, if you get cheap, is it cheaper?
So of the games that we went to, the one where I had a terrace seat, that was £2 cheaper than the seated tickets for that game.
That's good.
Which is fair enough, which is something we didn't have at like an Accrington, for example. It was the same price across the board. So that, in terms of pricing, I can't really complain about anything. And that's the nicest thing I can say about Cambridge in this episode. On to the final one, which is, of course, character. Now, you've mentioned it yourself. There's sort of ups and downs to this. It's pretty plain. There are some undesirable features, the gap between the stand and the pitch for away fans, the fact that you get penned in a park for half an hour by the police if you're playing against a team that are rivals, the fact that you have to go through a park to get into the ground. I guess that could be seen either way by some. But it's got all the old school features that we should like, but I just don't like it.
Yeah, I've not. Again, you've been 4 times, I've been twice. I just don't have an opinion on it. There's nothing that stands out in my mind that was like, I didn't like that, or I did like that. Yeah, we discussed the distance from the pitch isn't a good thing about it. But the outside, the facades of the stands, like how it looks, there's nothing I can really recall about the place. It's just, I think I used the word before, nondescript. It's just beige. Just, yeah, it's all right. It is what it is. Small, old ground. So I'm afraid I'm lacking things to say here about it that stick in my mind.
The only thing I wanted to add was in that for the away fans having to walk through the park to get in is, I believe the entrance to the park was a cattle game, if I remember rightly.
I think you might be right, yeah.
Which is hard for some fans. It's also, I guess the one thing I would say is, we've said before with grounds with no corners where you can see out, is it's nice to be able to see the city and the town. But in Cambridge, you're not in the city or the town, you're in the middle of nowhere. If you had a view of the lovely city, it'd probably be great, but you're looking at a corner shop, which I think is a bookies or something, and then an A road on the other side. So that probably takes a bit of the judgment as well.
Yeah, if it was nearer the city centre, I think you make a good point. Like, you saw, like, say, I don't know, some church steeples or something like the classic university buildings. Maybe, yeah, that'd be quite a nice touch, wouldn't it? But you're quite far removed from it, from basically civilization.
You don't feel like you're in Cambridge, really.
No, you are in the countryside. Well, maybe even, you alluded to it, cattle grids. There's possibly even farmland. So you are out in the sticks a bit.
So for me, probably the hardest one to rank of any of the areas in any stadium so far. I've tried to go middle of the road, but I can't quite bring myself to the top of it. So I'm going to stick with a 5 for this one, because I can't find something positive enough to get me up to the average score, which I would say is a 6.
In a quirky way, I do quite like the fact part of the walk is through a nice park.
Yeah.
So I will go on the more generous side and give a 6. But I was in the same situation as you, 5 or 6. But I'll go 6.
So that's probably just me being a little bit stubborn and horrible, really. But once Torp's visited 4 times, we'll probably readdress this. Not that he ever will, probably now. But if he does,
hopefully not. Hopefully they're never in the same league.
Again, hopefully not. But if you do,
no offence,
we'll judge it then. Otherwise, I think we've been fairly fair, particularly Tom. I've tried my best. Please do forgive me. If I have got any regular Cambridge fans on the channel, I'm sorry. I understand if you want to swear at me, but
he's trying to reignite that derby between the 2 clubs again.
I'm not, because I'm hoping we will never be close enough again. But either way, you can see the overall scores down below. Tom's, I think, is a little bit higher than mine. I think the only one I went above him was value, and that was only by 1. So probably won't make up for the rest of it. But if you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. Please get down in the comments below and let us know what you think. If you've ever visited as an away fan, do you agree with us? And if you're a Cambridge fan, I'm really, really sorry. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We'll have a new episode from this series every week. And I think if I've got my maths right, next week we go on to a far more positive one at the other end of the country. Am I right?
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
I think it's going to be one of the favourite ones. So hopefully you'll come and join us again for that. There's FM content every day in between. Thank you to Tom for joining me as always.
Cheers.
And hopefully we'll see you next time.